The phone rang, shattering the quiet of my apartment. I glanced at the screen, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the name. Emily. My sister. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the last blowout fight that left us both raw and angry. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Something about the timing felt off. It was late, too late for her to be calling just to chat. But curiosity, or maybe dread, got the better of me, and I answered. "Hey," I said, my voice cautious. "Hey, Sophie," she replied, her tone dripping with a smugness that immediately set me on edge. "You'll never figure out what I've done." I froze, the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables for dinner slipping from my hand and clattering onto the counter. Her words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I could hear the smirk in her voice, the same one she'd worn since we were kids, always so sure she was one step ahead of me. "What are you talking about, Emily?" I asked, my voice steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. She laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You're not as smart as you think you are, Sophie. You never were." I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the phone. "Funny you say that," I shot back, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Because the bank just called. They've traced every transaction, every withdrawal, every single one." There was a pause on the other end of the line, but it only lasted a second before Emily's laughter returned, louder this time. "Oh, Sophie, you really think that's going to stop me? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Her words sent a chill down my spine. There was something in her voice, something darker than usual, something I couldn't quite place. Before I could respond, she hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in stunned silence. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, trying to process what had just happened. Emily had always been manipulative, always looking for ways to get ahead, but this felt different. This felt calculated, deliberate.
And it scared me.
I forced myself to take a deep breath and refocus. If Emily thought she could intimidate me, she was wrong. I wasn't the same naive little sister she used to boss around. I'd grown up, become stronger, more resourceful. Whatever game she was playing, I was determined to uncover it and stop her. The first step was gathering information. I grabbed my laptop and opened the email from the bank. The subject line read, "Suspicious Activity Alert." My stomach churned as I clicked it open. Inside was a detailed report of recent transactions made under my name. Large sums of money had been transferred out of my account, withdrawals that didn't match my spending habits. Some of them dated back weeks, even months. How had I missed this? As I scrolled through the list, a pattern began to emerge. Each transfer went to a different account, none of which I recognized. But one thing stood out. They all shared the same routing number. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing. And based on Emily's cryptic warning, I had a pretty good idea who that someone was. But proving it wouldn't be easy. I needed evidence, concrete proof that Emily was involved. That meant digging deeper, tracing those accounts, finding connections between them and her. It wasn't something I could do alone. I needed help. My mind immediately turned to Alex, my best friend and business partner. He was tech-savvy, resourceful, and most importantly, trustworthy. If anyone could help me untangle this mess, it was him. I dialed his number, pacing back and forth across my kitchen as it rang. "Sophie." Alex answered after few rings. "Everything okay?" "Not exactly," I admitted. "Can you meet me at the coffee shop downtown in an hour? I need your help with something." "Sure, of course," he said, his voice laced with concern. "Is everything all right?" "I don't know yet," I told him honestly. "But I'll explain when you get here." By the time Alex arrived, I'd gathered everything I could think of. Printouts of the bank statements, screenshots of suspicious emails, even old photos of Emily and me together. Anything that might provide a clue or jog his memory. He raised an eyebrow as I spread the papers out on the table. "What's all this?" "It's a long story," I began, taking a deep breath. "But basically, I think Emily's been stealing from me." Alex's expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "Wait, hold on. Your sister? Stealing from you? Are you sure?" "I'm pretty sure," I said, pushing the printouts toward him. Look at these transactions. They don't add up. And then there was the call earlier tonight. She practically admitted it. He scanned the documents carefully, his brow furrowing as he pieced things together. After a few minutes, he looked up at me. This is serious. Do you want me to try and trace these accounts? Yes, please, I said gratefully. Anything you can find would help. Over the next few hours, Alex worked his magic, pulling up digital trails, cross-referencing data, and piecing together fragments of information. By the time we left the coffee shop, we had enough to confirm my suspicions, several of the accounts tied directly to Emily. Not only that, but some of the transfers appear to have been funneled into offshore accounts, likely to hide their origins. This isn't just about stealing from you, Alex said grimly as we walked back to our cars. She's covering her tracks. Big time. I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and frustration. Why would she do this? What does she even need the money for? That question haunted me as I drove home. Emily had always been ambitious, always chasing success, but this level of betrayal? It didn't make sense. Or did it? Maybe there was more to her motivations than I realized. Maybe there was something else driving her actions, something bigger than just greed. Determined to find answers, I spent the next few days diving deeper into Emily's life. I scoured social media profiles, searched public records, and even reached out to mutual acquaintances who might know something useful. Slowly but surely, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. It turned out Emily had been struggling financially for months. Her business ventures, once promising, had failed spectacularly, leaving her deeply in debt. To make matters worse, she'd recently separated from her husband, a move that had drained her resources even further. Desperate and cornered, she'd apparently turned to the only person she thought she could exploit, me. Knowing the why didn't soften the blow, though. If anything, it made it worse. How could she betray me like this, especially after everything we'd been through? Growing up, we'd fought constantly, yes, but we'd also supported each other during tough times. At least I thought we had. Now, looking back, I wondered if any of it had been real. Despite my growing resentment, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. Emily's schemes seemed too elaborate, too well-planned, to be solely about money. There had to be another layer to this, something I wasn't seeing yet. And until I found it, I wouldn't rest. So I kept digging, relentless in my pursuit of the truth. Because whatever secrets Emily was hiding, I was determined to expose them and bring her down in the process. Days turned into weeks as I continued my investigation. With Alex's help, I managed to track down additional leads, uncovering patterns and connections that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Emily wasn't just stealing from me. She was orchestrating a much larger scheme, one that involved multiple victims and layers of deception. One evening, while reviewing newly obtained financial records, I stumbled upon a document that stopped me cold. It was a contract, signed by Emily, transferring ownership of a small but lucrative property development company to an offshore entity. The signature matched hers, but the date predated her separation from her husband by several months. Why would she sell such a valuable asset unless she knew trouble was coming? Curious and slightly alarmed, I decided to investigate further. Using contacts Alex had introduced me to, I gained access to corporate filings related to the company. What I discovered shocked me. The offshore entity listed as the new owner bore striking similarities to one of the accounts linked to the fraudulent transfers from my own account. In essence, Emily hadn't sold the company at all. She'd merely moved its assets to protect them from creditors, or perhaps law enforcement. Realizing the implications of this discovery, I rushed to share the findings with Alex. Together, we devised a plan to gather even more evidence, ensuring we could present an irrefutable case against Emily should it come to that. Along the way, however, I couldn't help but wonder whether exposing her would truly resolve anything. Would justice satisfy the lingering questions I still carried about our fractured relationship? Or would it only deepen the divide between us? These doubts weighed heavily on me as the investigation progressed, complicating my resolve with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted nothing more than to see Emily pay for her crimes, while another part hoped against hope that reconciliation might still be possible. Yet as each new revelation emerged, the latter possibility grew dimmer, overshadowed by the harsh realities of her betrayal. Still, I pressed on, driven by a mixture of anger, determination, and a desire for closure. Whatever the outcome, I vowed to face it head-on, ready to confront whatever truths lay ahead. For better or worse, my journey toward understanding and possibly redemption was far from over. The weight of the evidence pressed down on me as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by piles of documents and digital files. Each piece of information seemed to paint Emily in a darker light, yet part of me refused to believe she was capable of such calculated deceit. Was this really the same sister who used to sneak me snacks during our parents' arguments? The same person who laughed with me late into the night when we were kids? But then I remembered the way her voice had sounded on that phone call. Cold, detached, almost gleeful. That wasn't the Emily I knew. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. Alex's words echoed in my mind. This isn't just about stealing from you. She's covering her tracks. Big time. He was right. What I was uncovering wasn't just a case of sibling rivalry or financial greed. It was something far more complex. Emily wasn't just trying to save herself. She was building an empire, one built on lies and manipulation. I decided to dig deeper into her past. If I wanted to understand why she'd gone so far, I needed to look beyond the surface. Over the next few days, I spent hours poring over old family photos, school records, and even news articles about our childhood. Anything that might give me insight into what drove her. One photo caught my eye, a faded snapshot of us at a summer camp when we were 12. We were both grinning ear to ear, standing in front of a cabin with Team Victory painted across the door. Back then, we'd been inseparable, united in our determination to win every competition they threw at us. But even then, there'd been hints of tension. Emily always wanted to be the leader, the one calling the shots. And if things didn't go her way, she'd sulk or lash out. I dismissed it as youthful drama back then, but now I wondered if those early signs had pointed to something deeper. As I delved further, I uncovered fragments of memories long buried. Like the time Emily convinced me to take the blame for breaking Mom's favorite vase. Or the way she'd subtly manipulated our parents into giving her preferential treatment, using charm and guilt to get what she wanted. At the time, I'd chalked it up to sibling rivalry, but now I saw it for what it was, a pattern of behavior that had only grown more sophisticated over the years. And then there was Dad's will. After he passed away 5 years ago, Emily had insisted on handling the finances, claiming it would be easier for everyone if she took care of it. At the time, I trusted her judgment, grateful not to have to deal with the legal complexities myself. Now, though, I wondered how much of that money she'd actually funneled into her own accounts. It wouldn't surprise me if some of it had ended up in those offshore entities I discovered. But why stop there? If Emily was willing to betray her own family, what else had she done? Who else had she hurt along the way? The more I thought about it, the more questions arose. And the more questions I had, the more determined I became to find answers. It was late one evening when I finally decided to confront Emily face to face. I couldn't keep circling around the issue anymore. I needed to hear it straight from her, her reasons, her motivations, her excuses. Maybe then I could begin to make sense of all this chaos. I called her, keeping my tone neutral. Hey, can we meet up tomorrow? There's something I need to talk to you about. There was a pause before she replied, her voice cautious.
Sure.
Where? How about the cafe near your place? I suggested. 11 o'clock? Fine, she said curtly before hanging up. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, choosing a table by the window where I could observe the street outside. As I waited, my mind raced with possible scenarios. Would she deny everything? Try to twist the truth to her advantage? Or would she confess? Perhaps even beg for forgiveness? When Emily walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, confident woman I'd seen in recent photos. In her place was someone tired, haggard, her usual sharpness dulled by stress and worry. She spotted me immediately and made her way to the table, sliding into the chair across from me without a word. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, I broke it. "You know why I'm here," I said quietly, meeting her gaze. She sighed, looking away. "Sophie, can't we just move past this? Whatever happened, it's water under the bridge." "Don't give me that," I snapped, leaning forward. "You've been stealing from me for months, transferring money to offshore accounts, hiding assets, lying to everyone, including yourself."
How can we move past something like that?
Her expression hardened, and for a moment, I saw the old Emily, the one who thrived on conflict and control. "What do you want from me, Sophie? An apology? A sob story? Because I don't owe you either." "You're wrong," I said firmly. "You owe me the truth. Why did you do it? Was it just about the money? Or is there something else driving you?" For a second, I thought she might storm out. Instead, she slumped back in her chair, her resolve faltering. "It's complicated, okay? You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I challenged. She hesitated, then began speaking in a low, strained voice. "Do you remember how hard we fought for attention growing up? How nothing we did ever seemed good enough for them? For Mom and Dad? They always compared us, always pushed us to be better, but no matter what we achieved, it was never enough. Not for them, not for each other." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd forgotten, or perhaps repressed, how deeply those comparisons had affected us both. We'd both struggled under the weight of their expectations, but while I channeled my frustration into independence, Emily had let it fester, turning it into resentment and ambition. "I thought if I succeeded where you failed, if I proved I was the better one, they'd finally see me," she continued, her voice trembling. But success didn't fix anything. It only made me hungrier, more desperate. And when things started falling apart, I panicked. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Sophie. I swear." I stared at her, unsure whether to believe her or dismiss it as another manipulative tactic. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to embrace her and tell her everything would be okay. But another part, a bigger part, knew that wasn't possible. Not yet. Not until she fully owned up to her actions and faced the consequences. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry." That night, as I lay awake in bed, I replayed the conversation in my mind. Her apology had felt genuine, but it also raised new questions. Was she truly remorseful, or was she just saying what she thought I wanted to hear? And even if she was sincere, could I trust her again? The answer, I realized, wasn't clear-cut. Forgiveness wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. It required time, effort, and proof of change. For now, all I could do was focus on protecting myself and ensuring justice was served. With renewed determination, I turned my attention back to gathering evidence. Working closely with Alex, I compiled a comprehensive report detailing Emily's fraudulent activities. We presented it to a lawyer who advised us on the best course of action. Legal proceedings would likely take time, but I was prepared to see it through to the end. In the meantime, I reached out to other potential victims, offering support and guidance as they navigated their own paths toward recovery. Together, we formed a small but resilient community, bound by shared experiences and a common goal, holding Emily accountable for her actions. Through it all, I learned an important lesson: betrayal, while painful, doesn't have to define you. It can strengthen you, teach you, and ultimately lead to growth. My relationship with Emily might never return to what it once was, but that didn't mean it was irreparably broken. Healing takes time, patience, and courage, and I was ready to take the first steps toward finding peace, both within myself and with the sister I loved despite everything. The days that followed my confrontation with Emily were a blur of activity and emotion. I found myself oscillating between anger, sadness, and an unsettling sense of detachment. On one hand, I was furious at her for the betrayal, for the years of manipulation and deceit. On the other, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow for the person she'd become. Somewhere along the way, my sister had lost herself in her pursuit of success, and it broke my heart to see her so consumed by her own ambition. But sentimentality couldn't cloud my judgment. Not anymore. The evidence against Emily was mounting, and I knew I had to act decisively if I wanted to ensure justice was served. With Alex's continued support, we finalized the legal documentation and submitted it to the authorities. It wasn't long before law enforcement took notice, launching an investigation into Emily's financial activities. While waiting for developments, I decided to revisit some unresolved aspects of our shared history. Perhaps understanding where things had gone wrong could provide closure, not just for me, but for both of us. So, one afternoon, I drove to our childhood home, a place neither of us had visited in years. The house stood as a silent witness to the countless arguments, laughter, and tears that had shaped our lives. Stepping inside felt like stepping back in time. The air smelled faintly of dust and nostalgia, and every corner held memories, some cherished, others painful. I wandered through the rooms, touching familiar objects, until I reached the attic. Up there, untouched by time, lay boxes filled with old letters, journals, and photographs. Among them, I discovered something unexpected, a journal belonging to Emily. At first, I hesitated to open it. Invading someone's privacy, even under these circumstances, felt wrong. But curiosity got the better of me, and I began flipping through its pages. What I read shocked me. Between entries detailing her aspirations and frustrations, there were glimpses of vulnerability, moments when she admitted feeling overshadowed by me or struggling with self-doubt. She wrote about how much she envied my ability to navigate life without seeming to try, how she often felt like she was fighting an uphill battle while I coasted effortlessly. These revelations painted a picture of a girl, and later, a woman, who carried deep insecurities beneath her confident exterior. Her need to prove herself hadn't stemmed solely from external pressures. It had been fueled by an internal fear of inadequacy. Reading her words, I realized that much of her behavior over the years might have been driven by this insecurity, manifesting in ways that hurt not only others but herself as well. This new perspective didn't excuse her actions, but it did humanize her. For the first time, I saw Emily not just as the antagonist in my story, but as someone equally scarred by our upbringing, someone who had chosen different paths to cope with the same wounds. And while I still struggled to forgive her fully, I began to understand her motivations on a deeper level. A few weeks later, the police contacted me. They had enough evidence to charge Emily with fraud, money laundering, and several other offenses. When they informed her of their findings, she initially denied everything, claiming the accusations were baseless. However, faced with irrefutable proof, she eventually confessed, though her admission lacked sincerity. To her, it seemed more like a strategic move than genuine remorse. When the news broke, it sent ripples through our extended family and social circles. Some expressed shock, unable to reconcile the image of successful Emily with the reality of her crimes. Others whispered behind closed doors, speculating about what might have driven her to such extremes. Through it all, I remained resolute, determined to see the process through to its conclusion. The trial loomed large, and preparations began in earnest. Testimonies needed to be gathered, documents organized, and strategies discussed with our legal team. During this period, I occasionally received updates about Emily's condition. She had been placed under house arrest pending trial, and reports indicated she was struggling emotionally. Whether this was genuine distress or merely another attempt to manipulate sympathy, I couldn't say. Despite the chaos surrounding me, I made a conscious effort to maintain balance in my own life. Work became a sanctuary, a space where I could focus on tangible goals rather than dwell on the turmoil. Friends rallied around me, offering comfort and encouragement. Even Alex, ever dependable, checked in regularly, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, I found myself reflecting on the changes within me since the ordeal began. I was stronger now, more resilient, less inclined to let others dictate my worth. The experience had stripped away layers of naivety and forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself and my relationships. While I wouldn't wish the pain of betrayal on anyone, I couldn't deny the personal growth it had catalyzed. It was during this introspection that I realized something crucial. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Holding on to anger or resentment only drains your energy and clouds your judgment. That didn't mean excusing Emily's actions. It meant freeing myself from the burden of letting her define my happiness or peace. Moving forward required acknowledging the past without allowing it to dictate the future. As the trial date approached, I prepared myself for the inevitable showdown. In court, Emily appeared composed, her lawyer presenting a carefully crafted narrative designed to minimize culpability. Witness after witness testified, recounting instances of deception and exploitation. When it came time for me to take the stand, I felt a surge of nerves but also clarity. This was my moment to speak my truth, to reclaim agency over a situation that had once threatened to overwhelm me. Under cross-examination, I remained calm, answering questions honestly, yet strategically. My testimony focused not just on the financial impact of Emily's actions, but also on the emotional toll they had taken. By the end, I believed the jury understood the gravity of her crimes, not merely as violations of law, but as betrayals of trust. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. As the judge sentenced Emily to several years in prison, I watched her face for any sign of regret, but there was none. Instead, she stared straight ahead, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting second, I wondered if she truly grasped the magnitude of what she had done, or if she would ever. Afterward, reporters swarmed outside the courthouse, eager for statements from either side. I declined to comment, choosing instead to retreat to the safety of my car. Inside, I allowed myself a single moment of relief, knowing that justice had been served, even if it didn't erase the scars left behind. In the months that followed, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. I threw myself into work, expanding my business ventures and pursuing passions I'd neglected during the upheaval. Occasionally, I thought about Emily, wondering how she was faring behind bars. Letters arrived sporadically, written in her neat handwriting, each one filled with pleas for understanding and promises of change. At first, I ignored them, unsure if I could handle reopening old wounds. Gradually, however, I began responding, keeping the exchanges brief and neutral. Our correspondence became a delicate dance, each letter testing boundaries and probing intentions. Over time, I noticed subtle shifts in her tone, genuine apologies replacing defensiveness, reflections replacing excuses. These changes gave me hope, though I remained cautious. Healing is a journey, not a destination, and I wasn't ready to rush it. Through it all, I learned to embrace imperfection, not just in others, but in myself. Life isn't black and white. It's messy, complicated, and full of contradictions. And while I may never fully reconcile with Emily, I've come to accept that sometimes love means letting go and trusting that both parties will find their own paths toward redemption. And so I move forward, carrying lessons learned and scars earned, grateful for the strength I've gained and hopeful for the future that lies ahead. The months following Emily's sentencing brought a strange sense of calm to my life, though it was far from the resolution I had imagined. Justice had been served, yes, but the weight of what had transpired still lingered like an unspoken shadow. My days were quieter now, filled with routine and purpose, yet tinged with moments of reflection that often caught me off guard. Work became my anchor during this period. With Alex by my side, we expanded our business ventures, taking on new projects and exploring opportunities that once seemed out of reach. The success we achieved wasn't just about professional growth. It was a testament to resilience, proof that even in the face of betrayal, one could rebuild and thrive. Still, no amount of achievement could completely fill the void left by the fracturing of my relationship with Emily. Our correspondence continued, albeit cautiously. Her letters grew more introspective over time, revealing glimpses of vulnerability I hadn't seen since childhood. In one particularly poignant note, she wrote about her fears, not of prison itself, but of losing herself entirely. She spoke of how isolation had forced her to confront truths she'd long avoided, truths about her actions and their consequences. For the first time, her words felt less like excuses and more like genuine attempts at self-awareness. I wrestled with how to respond. Part of me wanted to dismiss her musings as mere manipulation, a tactic designed to elicit sympathy. Another part, however, recognized the sincerity in her tone, however fragile it might be. Writing back became an exercise in balance, offering neither absolution nor condemnation, but rather a space for dialogue. It was a slow, painstaking process, each letter a step toward understanding, if not reconciliation. One day, as I sat at my desk drafting another response, Alex walked into my office carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of me and leaned against the edge of the desk, his expression thoughtful. "You okay?" he asked, watching me closely. "Yeah," I replied, though my voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "Just thinking." "About Emily?" I nodded, setting down my pen. "It's complicated. Every time I write to her, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. Is this helping her? Or am I enabling something else entirely?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's no easy answer to that, sophomore. All you can do is trust your instincts. If you feel like these letters are giving her a chance to reflect, then maybe that's enough for now." His words resonated with me. Trusting my instincts meant acknowledging both my doubts and my hopes, accepting that healing isn't linear and that progress often comes in small, incremental steps. With renewed clarity, I finished the letter, folding it carefully before slipping it into an envelope. As winter gave way to spring, I decided to visit Emily. The decision didn't come easily. It required confronting fears I hadn't fully admitted to myself. The fear of reopening old wounds, of being hurt again, or worse, of finding nothing but emptiness where I hoped for change. Yet deep down, I knew this was necessary. Closure, if it existed at all, wouldn't come from distance alone. The drive to the correctional facility was long and contemplative. Rolling fields and scattered trees passed by in a blur, their vibrant greens contrasting sharply with the heaviness inside me. When I arrived, I signed in and waited in the visiting area, my heart pounding with anticipation. Minutes later, Emily appeared, dressed in uniform, her posture stiff but composed. We sat across from each other in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, she broke the ice. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I needed to see you," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "To understand." She nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've thought about this moment a lot," she admitted. "What I'd say, how I'd explain. But there's no excuse for what I did. No justification. All I can offer is honesty." For the next hour, we talked, haltingly at first, then more fluidly as barriers began to fall. She recounted stories from her time in prison, sharing insights gained through therapy sessions and quiet reflection. She spoke of the guilt that haunted her, the regret that weighed heavily on her soul. And though her words weren't perfect, they carried weight, a rawness that suggested authenticity. Listening to her, I realized something profound. Forgiveness isn't always about absolving someone else. Sometimes, it's about freeing yourself. Holding onto anger or resentment only perpetuates cycles of pain, trapping both parties in a loop of bitterness and blame. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward, to prioritize peace over punishment. When our time together ended, I hugged her briefly, surprising us both. It wasn't a gesture of complete reconciliation, but it was a start, a bridge built on mutual acknowledgement of past wrongs and a shared desire for better futures. Back home, I found solace in unexpected places. Gardening became a therapeutic outlet, allowing me to channel emotions into nurturing life rather than dwelling on loss. Each seed planted symbolized hope, each bloom a reminder of renewal. Friends noticed the change in me, commenting on how grounded I seemed despite everything. They credited my strength, but I knew it stemmed from something deeper, a willingness to embrace imperfection and accept that some questions don't have answers. Summer turned to autumn, and with it came new beginnings. I launched a community initiative aimed at supporting victims of financial fraud, drawing inspiration from my own experiences. The project quickly gained traction, offering resources, education, and emotional support to those navigating similar challenges. Through it, I met individuals whose stories mirrored mine, each unique yet universally relatable. Together, we formed a network of survivors, bound by shared struggles and aspirations. Among them was Sarah, a woman whose husband had embezzled funds from her family business. Her journey echoed elements of my own, yet her perspective offered fresh insights. She spoke of finding meaning in adversity, using pain as fuel for transformation. Her words struck a chord within me, reinforcing the belief that even the darkest chapters hold potential for light. By winter, I felt ready to revisit certain aspects of my past. With Alex's encouragement, I began sorting through old photographs and memorabilia, creating a scrapbook that chronicled significant moments in my life. Included among them were pictures of Emily and me, snapshots capturing laughter, triumphs, and fleeting instances of connection. As I arranged the pages, I allowed myself to reminisce without judgment, cherishing memories untainted by recent events. On New Year's Eve, I attended a gathering hosted by friends, marking the occasion with quiet reflection rather than celebration. Standing on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, I watched fireworks illuminate the night sky, their brilliance fleeting yet breathtaking. In that moment, I understood that life operates much the same way, beautiful, unpredictable, and ever-changing. Emily sent a card that evening, wishing me happiness and expressing gratitude for our ongoing communication. Though brief, her message conveyed warmth, a sign of progress in its own right. Reading it, I smiled, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within me. Healing isn't instantaneous, nor is it guaranteed. But it is possible, one small victory at a time. And as I stood there, surrounded by friends and dreams yet unrealized, I knew I was moving in the right direction, toward a future defined not by betrayal, but by resilience, compassion, and grace. The following spring, life seemed to bloom alongside the flowers. As I walked through my garden one morning, the sun casting golden rays over the vibrant blooms, I felt a profound sense of peace settle within me. The world around me was alive with renewal, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to fully embrace it. My relationship with Emily continued to evolve, though slowly and cautiously. Our letters became less about justifying the past and more about building bridges toward the future. She shared stories of her days in prison, small victories like completing a course or helping another inmate, and I responded with updates from my own life, careful to include moments of joy and growth. There was no grand reconciliation, no sweeping forgiveness that erased everything that had happened. Instead, there was understanding, a fragile but growing awareness that we were both human, flawed, and capable of change. One day, as I sat at my desk reviewing plans for an upcoming project, Alex stopped by unannounced, holding 2 cups of coffee and a grin that spoke volumes. "You busy?" he asked, plopping down into the chair opposite me. "Always," I teased, accepting the coffee with a smile. "But you know me, I can multitask." He chuckled, then grew serious. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Remember that community initiative you started last year? Well, it's growing faster than either of us anticipated. People are responding to it in ways we never imagined. Some are even asking if they can volunteer their time or skills." My heart swelled with pride. What had begun as a personal mission to support others in similar situations had grown into something far greater, a movement fueled by resilience and hope. "That's incredible," I said, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "It's exactly what I hoped for." "It's not just incredible, it's inspiring," Alex replied, his voice filled with admiration. "You've turned something so painful into something so meaningful. That takes strength, Sophie. Real strength." His words resonated deeply, reminding me of how far I'd come since that fateful phone call months ago. Strength wasn't about being invincible. It was about facing challenges head-on, learning from them, and emerging stronger on the other side. It was about choosing to focus on light rather than darkness, on possibilities rather than regrets. Later that evening, as I prepared dinner, I found myself reflecting on all that had transpired. My journey hadn't been easy, nor had it followed a straight path. There were moments of anger, sadness, and doubt, emotions I wouldn't trade because they shaped who I am today. But alongside those struggles, there were also triumphs. Friendships deepened, passions reignited, and lessons learned that would stay with me for the rest of my life. As I sat down to eat, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Emily. For once, it wasn't heavy with apology or explanation. Instead, it simply read, "Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Tears welled up in my eyes, but this time, they weren't born of pain. They were tears of hope, of connection, of a bond that, while tested, remained intact in its own imperfect way. I typed back a quick response. "We're all works in progress, Em. Let's keep moving forward together." When I pressed send, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't always about forgetting. Sometimes it's about letting go of the need to hold on to resentment, about choosing to see the good in people despite their flaws. And sometimes it's about giving yourself permission to heal. The days that followed brought new opportunities and fresh starts. I expanded my business ventures, launched additional programs through the community initiative, and reconnected with old friends whose presence reminded me of simpler times. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was rich with meaning, filled with moments of beauty and purpose. And as I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I smiled. The road ahead might still hold challenges, but I faced them now with confidence and optimism. Because no matter what came next, I knew one thing for certain. I was stronger than any storm, braver than any fear, and capable of finding light even in the darkest corners. For the first time in years, I truly believed that anything was possible. And that belief alone was enough to carry me forward, step by hopeful step, into whatever lay ahead.